evening and welcome to the coffee table. So yesterday, on the 11th of April, the first phase of elections in India kicked off. India is the world's largest democracy, 1.3 billion people, and millions will go to the polls in the next 30 days or little more than 30 days. So right up to the 19th of May, the 7 phases of the Indian election will take place. On the 23rd, counting will happen and the results will be announced the same day. But this time the elections are a little different. This time the noise and the levels and the narratives are very different. So that's what we thought we would discuss, narratives. So we have with us Hussain, right? We've talked about a lot of things. We do talk about a lot of things. Hussain has been on the coffee table before also. He's an analyst. He's a PhD scholar, right? He looks at the intersection between development and security, securitization of narratives also. Meher is back today, right? She's still grieving for her brother. But Meher, thanks for coming back to the coffee table. So let's start. Narratives, right? Narratives seem to be leading everything. So the tail is beginning to wag the dog.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you don't realize, but the idea of war itself, we specifically talk about the narratives, it has changed entirely now. It doesn't really matter who wins
who's won, who's lost, who's shot down, who's not shot down.
What matters
who had a cup of tea, who didn't get a cup of tea.
Exactly. The whole point is that whose story wins eventually. Yeah. And that is exactly what is going on since Pulwama, and after that, the way the both narratives are coming into clashes with each other. That is the core area that is becoming more and more problematic, because in India we have elections coming up, and the narratives is eventually going to be the driving force behind that, and that has created a very big political.
So what's happening to India? I mean, there is such centrifugal force being generated right now, right? With the rhetoric that has become the kind of backdrop to this current election, right? There seems to be a lot of noise about what India isn't all about or wasn't supposed to be all about. Whatever happened to secular India?
I think it can be summed up very nicely in Farooq Abdullah's words. I'm going to read it because I want to tell you his exact words. He spoke on April 7th, and Farooq Abdullah, I guess it's also a matter of, growing older and becoming not politically correct. He doesn't really care about being politically correct anymore, and even about winning the elections. So he said, मोदी साहब को जीतना था इलेक्शन, इसलिए उन्होंने करवाया, उन्होंने कारनामा पुलवामा किया. Then he went on to say that murderers of Mahatma Gandhi are now in power in Delhi. आज दिल्ली में हुकूमत जो कर रहे हैं वो वही हैं जो महात्मा गांधी के कातिल हैं. He went on to say that leader Vallabhbhai Patel, the Home Minister, had in fact banned RSS. Abdullah, who has earlier made snide remarks at the center over claims of the Balakot strike's success, said India should request that a UN committee be formed to investigate and reveal proof of damage in Balakot strikes conducted by Indian Air Force.
I think that's a done story now. Is there still anything in that story?
Not really. Right? I mean,
we heard all kinds of absurdities and said those bombs were designed to penetrate the roof, right? And they exploded inside.
Oh, he said that only trees have been damaged. You see, when it comes from people like Farooq Abdullah, people who have very openly sided with the Indian state throughout. It was, even though his father had been jailed by Nehru and a very close friend for a number of years, Farooq Abdullah and Umar Abdullah, both chief ministers, former chief ministers of Jammu and Kashmir, have been very clear about their patriotism.
Kashmir is a different issue right now, right?
Kashmir but Pulwama is Kashmir, so everything
not exactly. Yes, it happened in Kashmir.
What has happened is that everything that BJP is saying, all of you must have read Amit Shah's.
We've read.
You've read that. Recent. So now, when you are talking about an election of 1 billion people, and they are going to vote, and most of your big things, big policies, big promises have failed, from demonetization to we'll bring the black money back, there will be a certain amount of money in every person's bank account, and
we want to talk about.
I'm saying that is why everything that is coming from Modi and BJP is about Pulwama, about Balakot, about the CRPF Jawans, about the sacrifice, I mean, look at his tweet. He's asking first-time voters to keep in consideration what happened to CRPF people and what Indian government has done. Taking the credit from Indian Army, that has nothing to do with any particular government. Indian Army is Indian Army. It doesn't belong to Congress or the BJP. But the fact, you must have read it or heard about that too. Indian soldiers, even like people in high positions have started to talk about it. They resent it.
I agree. I mean, I think we have to look at it in different dimensions. There is a general shift since 9/11.
Yeah.
And that shift is slowly moving towards, initially the idea was that somehow the Muslim world is becoming radicalized in terms of discourses, the narratives.
Yeah.
We have seen after the New Zealand attack as well, the white supremacism, and that narrative has also started penetrating across the world. But now I think the one area that was left missing and ignored for the longest time, because the global focus was entirely on Islamist radicalization, this Hindu extremist mentality. I don't like to use the word religion in the word, but if we have to label something like that, this extremism in India is also there, which is kind of shaping the narratives, both domestic and global. The way India is being seen right now at the global arena is disturbing. And one example to look at it as actually, if you look at all the reports coming out of the US, you look at Washington Post, you look at New York Times, you look at any senior expert in the US.
Foreign policy.
One
of the most read.
They are attributing certain levels of blame to the Modi government, and they're not endorsing what has been done. So eventually, when we talk about the narratives itself, there is domestic pressure on Modi, because for the 5 years he was in the government, he pressed upon this anti-Muslim rhetoric, anti-beef, etc., etc. He went along with that, and for political purposes. And now is the time to actually roost all that before the elections. Pulwama happened, so it kind of brought in that entire idea how we can use the anti-Pakistan rhetoric. And this is one of the funniest part, because for the longest time we believed that somehow Pakistanis are obsessed with Indians.
Yeah.
It's completely changed.
It's been flipped on its head.
You see, the narrative in Pakistan during the elections was all about corruption.
It has always been that way.
Corruption.
Yeah.
This was the biggest thing. In India, the core narrative, the winning point is actually Pakistan.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot about what's going on in this region.
Securitization? Is it securitization of the narrative, of the elections itself? Right? There has been some pushback.
I think securitization allows a particular political elite to create emergency-like situations where all other issues of development, human concerns and economics are put behind, and then you can talk conveniently about security issues, because that allows a very convenient way to distract the public.
Sure.
The economy in India, as Meher was just talking about, Modi has not delivered the way he actually projected it. So, caught in the corruption scandals as well, I think this Pulwama attack and the entire narrative that has come out of it, it's securitization of the elections, in my opinion, and that's disturbing.
It's also connected to what you said about the way the world has changed after 9/11, because if you read anything that comes from the Indian state vis-a-vis Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, it is not about the right of self-determination or the fight that has been going on since the 1930s. More and more, increasingly, you see it on mainstream media, you see it everywhere, that what they are trying to show is that it's Islam. It's the religion that is the driving force that is changing people in Kashmir. It is not people who want freedom, it is people who want radicalization of the region. So that works for a party like BJP that was in absolute majority. It didn't, 44 seats of Congress and BJP's absolute majority has finally brought India to a point where Indian mainstream politicians have completely trashed Indian government's statements about Pulwama and Balakot. And that has backfired. You see, when Rahul Gandhi says something, obviously it's going to be picked up by international newspapers. When Sam Petroda, somebody very close to Rahul Gandhi, says something, when Mehbooba Mufti says something, when Umar Abdullah is saying something, and there are many other people from other parties, very prominent politicians, since we only talk about a few. They are all talking about the same thing, that we do not believe that what the Indian government is claiming that the Indian government has, Indian army has done in Balakot. So it has backfired for India in India. It's not because of Pakistan. It is what Indians are saying.
You see, I agree to that, but here's the thing on that. Prime Minister Modi understands this thing. Does he care about it? You see, when you're in the policy space, we usually call this specific thing that there are losers and there are winners.
Sure.
And you have to make decisions. Prime Minister Modi has, at this point of time, decided that it's okay to have a dent in the national interest. It's okay to completely take India to a hyper-radicalization area where the global community will be puzzled for some time. But that is the cost he's ready to pay.
Okay, we're going to come back to that, the global community in India, right? Yeah. So we're going to take a short break and we're going to come back to that. So we're talking about India, we're talking about the narrative, the skewing of what happened in February, mid-February, what happened as an aftermath of that, the whole securitization of the Indian elections, right? So come back, stay with us after the break and let's take this further. Right, so this is the first time that we're actually seeing the Indian armed forces being drawn into an Indian election, right? They have become part of the narrative. The IAF has been at pains trying to claim the shooting down of an F-16. All the evidence they've shown to date has been questioned, not just by Pakistan, but by independent observers. There's been a huge amount of discussion on that, right? So what are they trying to do? And recently, right, there has been a little bit of pushback on references to the Election Commission of India also, and saying why are the armed forces being drawn in and being dragged into these elections? Are we seeing in India changing irrevocably? Is the Indian army, the Indian armed forces now going to be part of the democratic narratives?
You see, when you securitize the elections, specifically when it comes to the foreign policy space, and you have Pakistan as an enemy, you're projecting that, you're naturally involving India, Indian military onto the space of political and electoral rhetoric. Now that becomes very, very problematic because the military as an institution cannot pick particular sides. But you're constantly pushing and dragging the military into that arena. What eventually happens out of that is a sort of civil-military tussle that starts. And there are signs that are emerging, there are chatter going on that the Indian military is not very happy with what has been going on in the past 1 month.
Because they've been embarrassed.
They've been very much embarrassed. A particular political leader using the entire incident to project his part, that is unacceptable to all the militaries. The good thing in India is that there is no precedence of Indian military involving in the politics, but it's going the other way around. So what the reaction eventually will be, I personally foresee a sort of civil-military slightly, it won't go completely ballistic, but there will be slightly problems on that front. But coming back to again the narrative point of things, where we left off the discussion earlier, this is unprecedented what is happening in India. We've never seen anything like that. We have seen that in Pakistan in the 80s. And it took Pakistan 40 years to come to a point where India is not an issue in the elections.
It's not part of the election manifestos.
And you see, in Pakistan, if we have to say, there is a large Muslim Sunni population. So the extremism, the radicalization, the politicization of religion, it still had created a havoc, but it was absorbed, it was digested. In India, you take that route, the diversity over there will bubble it up, and I think we're going to have serious problems over there. So,
Mayor, what do you think of Imran Khan's interview? Saying if Modi wins, it's good.
Because he's talking about the past. It happened in the late 70s.
No, he's talking very much about the future.
I said
and saying
because
we may be able to talk to Modi, but not to Gandhi.
It happened in the late 70s. It happened with Vajpayee. It also happened with Modi recently. So, and as somebody has written this article in Hindu, a very interesting article, that Imran Khan likes to keep people guessing. It's not that he will do what he has said he will do, but he wants people to think that this is what he's going to do.
I kind of agree with Imran Khan's statement, Prime Minister Imran Khan's
statement. We talked about it in an earlier program.
Exactly.
We said BJP will be in a better position to talk about Kashmir and maybe look for a resolution whether they do or they don't.
Hardliners on both sides naturally have more muscle
what has happened is that even though BJP won about 32 or 33% vote in the 2014 elections, and I remember talking to a bunch of Indians in Amritsar, Punjab, they said India is never going to change because this is just a very small part of India, and India is much more than those 33% votes. And today, and I am saying this on record because whenever I talk to people, they are normal, regular people from all backgrounds. Talking means I text them or email them or I interact with them on Twitter. They are actually concerned. It's not that this is something that is hyped by Pakistan or, there are people who are gleefully saying, look what's happening in India, that's what happened in Pakistan, now it's happening in India. It is actually happening. There is the biggest thing, the biggest beauty of India to me is its pluralism. And when you're talking about an India...
Was its pluralism?
When you talk about India and the number of Muslims that live in India, and there's a statement by Amit Shah, I guess the most powerful man in BJP, he says that no infiltrator other than the Sikh, the Buddhists, and what was the third? Hindus, Sikhs, and Buddhists. Otherwise, we will not. Infiltrator means no refugees. So they are still saying that Muslims had a chance to leave India in 1947. And those who left, good. Those who didn't, they will pay a price for that.
I agree to a particular extent, but I think we also have the tendency to exaggerate from our side as well on how much these narratives, this divide is actually playing in the Indian politics. Let's be honest over there, India is huge.
I agree.
And in the South, India does not really care about Pakistan at all. So essentially, I mean, they
don't even care about the North of India.
They don't care about the North India.
Yes, I was coming to that. Yes,
essentially the point of the elections is that Pulwama has helped a particular strand of Indian establishment, the North Indian establishment that has a particular issue with Pakistan. And that's unfortunate because the Indian airwaves, the national narratives are kind of hijacked by the North Indians as well. So which kind of puts the South India in an awkward situation with them. So essentially to say that somehow Indian elections have become entirely about, it would be unfair on our part.
It is.
But it has become so prominent that it was unprecedented. Yeah, the Bollywood actors, the cricketers, people pouring in into this sentiment. It kind of tells you that BJP
wearing camouflage caps to a cricket match, right?
But there is what has made this government think that this is what the Indian people want. Just what you said. I wrote an article for one of the media houses in India, and even though those were things I have said and written before, but they said because of our editorial policy these days, we will not be publishing anything from a Pakistani's point of view. But eventually, that same article was published in India in a not on some unknown online thing. It was published by a magazine which has a huge circulation. And guess what? The editor is South Indian, because they don't really care about what Modi and all these people are trying to do. Yeah, I completely agree. I still believe that it's not the whole of India, but the thing is, this is what we can comment on. We cannot be talking about the good things and people who are standing up because we don't really know about those people. There are 750 actors actually, or more. They wrote. They have written a letter. They're telling people to be responsive and open-minded and vote the way they should and not go as per the government dictates.
What about our media? Why are we not interested in the Indian election?
Never were.
I think Pakistan is actually going through its own strategic shifts at the moment, in my opinion. You have Prime Minister Imran Khan's government. The economic issues are so important right now that I think Pakistan's general public has become very much away from the global politics as well.
Does our media care about what the public thinks and what the public wants?
I mean, media doesn't really care about anything, frankly, beyond TRP.
But TRPs, I mean, come on.
Essentially.
What are TRPs all about? We don't even have a real mechanism to measure TRPs accurately. We're just guessing.
Practically. From one single source.
I would like to
Not
see
even
that
multiple
thing.
Sources.
The thing that people are supposed to have in their home, and they click a button, and
the
original TRP.
What does that tell you? It just tells you a television is on, right? It is at this frequency, most likely watching this thing. Whether it was muted, whether I was looking away, whether I was playing on my phone, I was talking to somebody else. I was writing an article, I was reading a book. It doesn't measure any of that.
Yeah.
So the echo chamber, right, the social media platforms, so everything gets amplified. My own, let's say, hypothesis is editors have lost all control. No editor actually controls anything today.
Who does that?
The anchors?
No, not even the anchors. I do, you do. Yeah. I write what I want to write. I comment on the way I want to comment. I can take any news and lay anything over it.
Pakistan's social media is full of this thing that everything in Pakistan is censored. And they're not allowed to write anything.
What censored?
I don't. I've never understood this.
Why can't Maida write his own blog? Has he been stopped to write a blog?
We're not. But you know, people like us who have written on every subject.
There is a certain limit of censorship, but Pakistan's censorship is not.
I'll tell you how news is censored. News is censored because the model of news is wrong. People do not pay for news.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody subscribes to news.
Yeah.
It is the advertisers who pay for the news.
Absolutely.
And when an advertiser is paying for the news, big business is going to influence it. Government subsidize the news. They're going to control the narrative. And they are controlling the narrative. They've always controlled the narrative.
Precisely.
Even in India, right, the narratives are controlled by big business.
Oh, yes.
Right? So Rafale, right, Pakistani pilots have actually flown it before the Indians have.
Yeah.
Because of the Qatar purchase. That's another very interesting part of the narrative that's running out.
Precisely.
Right, in saying...
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we try to, we become very self-critical at some points when it comes to media censorship and all that. Yeah. We just had Julian Assange
absolutely
arrested.
Yes.
Yesterday.
In one of a very shameful way. So, I mean, the entire idea of democracies, freedom of press and speech, let's be honest, it's not the same way that it is, because when your national interest is compromised, there are certain measures under the Patriot Act by the United States to take extraordinary measures. And when that happens, you have, there are questions.
We talk about freedom of speech, right? But the definitions of freedom of speech also vary, right? It's in the context of what is being said when.
Yeah.
Right? So Oliver Wendell Holmes, right, falsely crying fire in a theater when there is none, right, to create panic is not protected by freedom of speech.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one of the most unfortunate things that I have seen on our social media is that all of us may have done that. You know, you read something or you hear something and you post it, and then somebody tells you that it's incorrect. I delete it like within seconds, and I post an apology, even though it's not hurtful or it wasn't inflammatory or it wasn't meant to create any kind of chaos. But then you see all these like big names, so-called big names in Pakistan, because I have never seen more Twitter following of media people than I have seen in Pakistan, and to some extent in India. In India, there is a Barkha or a Rajdeep Sardesai and a couple of other people who have like followers in millions. Here, every second TV anchor has or host or...
Because the power has diluted, right? So from the state, the power has diluted to the media and to the individuals.
How can
and that is partly because, then again, coming to the point of narratives, there was a time when the state would shape the narratives through textbooks, public textbooks, through one PTV, state channels. But the power has completely diluted now, which
wonderful.
is what
That's
it is
great.
Wonderful. But then again, there is chaos. Then
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Why wouldn't you not delete if you know for a fact that this is incorrect information? That is my point. I'm honestly, at the end of the day, I'm fine with freedom of speech and what people want to write or they don't want to write. Because what I have seen I can only talk about writing. What I have seen is that living in Pakistan, I have written about everything. And nobody has ever sent me hate mail. People abuse me simply for being, but they don't really abuse me for what I write.
That's strange.
You know the topics I write on.
I'll use the Churchillian view on that and saying if you don't have anybody hating you, that means you're not doing anything significant.
I'm
happy to part of it.
That gives me some consolation.
Because it is about polarities, right? It is about polarities. It is about different viewpoints and diversity of thought.
Absolutely.
Right? And not everybody has to agree with everybody.
We don't have a problem with that. All three of us.
We're going to take another short break and we'll come back after that. And let's examine, right, what's happening with the news. What's happening with the news anywhere, right? What is exactly fake news, right? And how do you separate it? And how do you distinguish it? How do you filter it out of anything else?
Absolutely.
We'll take a break. We're going to talk about fake news. I hope Mr. Trump is watching this. welcome back. So there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of books have been written, a lot of essays, or a lot of articles. The discussion is everywhere and saying what is happening to news? Is the whole concept of news the way we knew it, where journalists were involved, editors had control, right? There was some authenticity to that, there was some credibility to that. All that has been under threat, all that has been attacked. Is that true? Is there really so much news, right, that is not being controlled, not being verified, not being, is not credible, or does not have a credible source? All do I have to do is say, I got this from a source, right? And I can say whatever I like. Is that really what's happening?
You see, everyone in today's world is a broadcaster now.
And a publisher.
And a publisher.
Yeah.
And an editorial.
And an editor, and a
everything.
journalist, and an investigative journalist, and an analyst.
You see, it will take us some years before we absorb this new reality. It has all happened so quickly that people are still finding a balance. Once we have the balance, then we'll start having these specific social media laws, etc., etc., and then self-censorship of people as well on what is right and what is not supposed to be done. But this is not something new. People somehow tend to think that fake news is new. You look at the history, and I'll take it back to Greek mythology.
Sure.
Those mythologies are also fake news.
So a lot of that.
They were created to intimidate the Spartans and so on and so forth till the Aryan race myth by the Nazi regime, the Third Reich. It has become more robust and powerful because of the new methods of technology.
Right. So access to information has increased.
These all were essentially narrative-making tools. And they have become so prominent that each individual in their home with a phone can actually be part of a particular narrative through hashtags.
Sure.
That is what the real problem is, and it will require a lot of different educational mechanisms, etc., to ensure that those narratives somehow don't become volatile or violent.
That is the main thing. There are some fake news that is just fake news. It dies on its own very quickly, and then most of what we see on our timelines and on our television screen is systematic manufacture of a narrative, of a particular narrative. Just to give an example, I'm not going into the right and the wrong and the truth or the falsity about it, but like what happened regarding former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's health issues a few weeks ago. An entire narrative was constructed. It was very clear because I could see one journalist now I'm not talking about normal, regular, unknown tweeters. I saw one mainstream, very prominent journalist or a print journalist, one after the other, saying the same thing on Twitter, that his health is in danger and he should be given a bail and he should be allowed to go out of Pakistan. So I call that a construction of a narrative. As I said, I'm not commenting on anything about the truth or the falsehood of what was being presented, but it was very clear that what they were doing was making of a narrative. And so that is where the danger lies. It's okay, all of us say crazy things, all of us can post fake news, but if I start a systematic campaign to say, for instance, say something about Faisal, and I start it, and it becomes, then I write about it, then it's on television, then it's on social media, then people start to talk about it, then it becomes a campaign. Then it's a narrative.
It's a question about reality and the perception of reality, because to each, the reality seems very different from different
angles. The point of view is from my viewpoint, right? How am I looking at a particular thing?
Absolutely.
Right? And then how much I want to believe, right? The credibility matrix, right? If you are going to say something which is in consonance with my own belief system, right? I'm not going to question the credibility of it. I'm not going to question whether it is verifiable or not verifiable. Again, going back, right, to Pulwama, going back to the narrative, right? No matter how many times it's been refuted, right? A lot of India wants to believe of what happened on what is 27th of
because it reinforces that entire myth that has been created that somehow India is a superpower. And that myth is kind of driving them to a point where they're creating self-created truths out of it. So
if the Americans could come to Ahmedabad, right, we can go to Balakot.
We can go to Balakot.
We can go to Balakot and we can do what we wanted to do, and nobody can stop us, right?
Absolutely.
So does it really fly? There is so much which refutes it, right? This whole thing of the Indian Air Force trying to show us radar tracks and all.
You see, these are big gambles that Prime Minister Modi has taken.
Yeah.
Initially, there was surgical strike.
Yeah.
That went haywire.
Yeah.
It becomes sour. It was embarrassing moment. This time, this is a second hit. If you look at the global perception at the moment, most of the prominent experts on the area region and all that, they understand the Indian muscle around the world, which is why they're not very openly going to criticize. But the way they're talking about the issue, it has kind of brought the balance, which again serves the interest of Pakistan in a way that India has not been able to push its narrative. And if you look at the Indian narrative that is coming out as well, they're very much anxious over ISPR.
Yeah.
Because ISPR has for the last decade or so invested heavily on the narratives front. India, on the other hand, does not have the same level of muscle or the ISPR.
Right.
So in a sort of war frenzy, they came up with this very silly sort of presentation by IAF, which was practically some slides talking about that we have the evidence but we can't share it because it's...
Absolutely.
So that tells you how much
if they had
difference
stuck
there
to
is.
that right in the beginning, that of course we have done this, we have killed 300 people, we have brought down planes and left it at that would have been okay. But as I said, what happened was, after the initial wah-wah by the Bollywood celebrities and everybody on social media and even politicians of the opposition, it all came down to the elections, because the other side do not really have much to sell either. So all they could do was show people that if your Prime Minister, the person who is controlling your fate at the moment, can lie to this extent, imagine what he will do. Now, what happened after the 4th April foreign policy article, in which two unnamed American
Pentagon officials.
Who?
Pentagon officials.
Pentagon officials, when they announced that all F-16s are intact and nothing really happened. And what I read, it was a foreign analyst, and he said, no matter how Pakistanis would like to look at it or Indians would like to paint it as, he said Pakistan has so much opposition, which is of course not good for us. Pakistan has so much hostility vis-a-vis Pakistan within the American establishment, that if this thing had happened, Americans wouldn't have cared about, protecting the sanctity of their F-16 and how it can't be, bombed by a MiG and so on and so forth. And they would have said that an F-16 was bombed.
It is kind of strange, though, in my opinion, that Americans coming out so strongly on this issue. I mean, we all know this thing that articles in foreign policy or through correspondents, they are pitched.
Absolutely.
They are leaked. So, to me, I read that as Americans kind of giving a not so much endorsement to Prime Minister Modi, that if you're taking such a strong position where Pentagon officials are talking about that this has happened, this has never happened, the claims are false, and a lot of other very strong language is coming out of it, that tells you a lot where the global narrative is shaping. But here is the thing, I mean, if I'm Prime Minister Modi, this is the price I'm ready to pay.
Sure.
This is short-term political hit that I will take for a long-term electoral interest. And again, coming back to the Prime Minister Imran Khan's point about Modi, that we will have better chance of peace with that, is partly because of this thing that no matter whichever government comes into India, especially if it's Prime Minister Modi, the first thing he will do is reach out to Prime Minister Imran Khan.
Right.
That is given, because this entire narrative that has been created, he has to counter that.
That's a pretty strong statement.
It will have to be that.
It will have to be that.
It will have to. There is no second opinion, and I'm ready to bet my PhD degree on this issue that is almost always the case.
That is exactly what it did after the last elections.
Precisely. That has already happened. So we can expect some sort of repression.
There was a very interesting kind of an article on that, and saying, well, the ISI keeps track of every dialogue, every discourse, any discussion that any Pakistani politician has with an Indian politician. In this context, the Prime Minister with the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Whereas on the Indian side, right, it is not that cut and dry.
Yeah.
It is not that simple. One of the people who's been absolutely quiet through all this is Ajit Doval.
Yeah.
Where has he disappeared?
He has been silent.
Because he still feels bad about the hijacking and what led to it. Because he's still being blamed for that.
He's become a victim of internal politics in India, which is very cutthroat.
Yeah, but
at
he
the
had
moment.
met Nasir Janjua. not too far in the past.
Yeah.
Right. In what is it? Hong Kong was it, or
Yeah.
Thailand? I think it was Thailand. Right, where the two national security advisors could actually sit down and they could
I
talk
think
about
this was
something.
2016.
Right. So maybe Nasser Jinjua prevailed.
And you know, this was right after when the SAARC summit was cancelled, and Sushma Swaraj had given another very antagonistic statement, and right after that there was this undercover.
So Kashmir, right, in the context of this election, right, so is there really an election happening in Kashmir?
I mean, from the initial news that is coming out, it is very depressing, the sites that are coming out over there. I do wish that the elections in their truest form actually happen over there, but the way they're being done, where the military and the forces the border security forces are being used to get the votes for BJP, this is
No, but this is the
sight.
first time when you see all of them kind of together. I think all of them are saying the same thing, that they have to fight BJP and what BJP is trying to do. When it comes from somebody like Mehbooba Mufti, she was a part of the coalition until she wasn't, even though her father was always against things that the BJP stood for. Now, for once, Farooq Abdullah, you must have seen Mehbooba Mufti and Umar Abdullah's interaction on Twitter. They've become allies. And I think that would, in a way, if elections are going to take place in India, this would be the best thing for, elections are going to take place in Jammu and Kashmir. When they do, that these two parties,
They're voting already.
they also, I'm sorry, I must have missed that, because the last thing I saw was Umar Abdullah's tweet.
That's going viral right now.
He was very upset when they said that these elections are going to be, Jammu and Kashmir elections are going to be postponed. So what I'm saying is, if they join forces, that can be quite lethal for
I don't know, BJP is clearly ahead in every poll so far.
in Jammu and Kashmir.
Generally, overall in India.
No,
right?
India, yes, but not Jammu and Kashmir right now.
Yeah, it might have some problems over there, but I think the larger problem will still remain over there, because as long as the certain elements and certain thinking is there, but like they say in the American government, that most of the work, the soft policies come in the second term. In the first term, you don't do any serious policy work. So there's only one can hope that if Prime Minister Modi comes to power.
We have, whether we like it or not, we do have shared destinies. We share the rains, we share the waters, we share the
And
air.
shared problems.
Right? So how are we going to be in continuous, perpetual conflict?
I think this sentiment, I've kind of started to believe that is shared more on our side than their side. It was initially very much prevalent over there, that Pakistan and India, the friendship. I think that has kind of died down in the last decade or so, specifically after 2008.
I think it has also died down in Pakistan, by the way.
In Pakistan,
somebody
I think
like
still
me,
hopeful that
who is a perpetual proponent of peace. When I talk to people in general, I see a kind of hostility towards India that was, missing last year.
I actually think
have
not at
younger
all.
people.
Actually, in younger people, I think there is a lot more.
But that's the thing. It's this is my opinion, and I have a right to tell you what I've noticed.
No, right to tell.
No,
but,
I'm saying I have noticed that.
But there's got to be evidence of that.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. People have spoken to. I have noticed that now.
The biggest indicator of that is the elections.
No, look at what happened post Pulwama.
I say this too. I have said this on Indian media. I have written about it, that for the first time I'm seeing that Pakistani military establishment, Pakistan government, Pakistani people, everybody is on the same. They are on the same page. They do not want war with India. They want to have a good relationship with India. But what I'm saying is, I'm not saying they want war or anything. I'm just saying that for once now, because of so much hostility on social media and so many statements from, for instance, Bollywood actors and celebrities, that is what younger people notice. They don't really read hard analyses, and they don't really pay attention to what the politicians. They're very upset.
I would differ on that, because I think young people are so politically charged that they probably read a lot more on the policy, on the news, the articles. And I am kind of still in the young people bracket, and I think the generation that we belong to, and it's not just about India, we have a lot more tolerant opinion on India in terms of the peace that we want, and not just on India, but domestically in Pakistan as well, in the sectarian issue, etc. The younger people are coming out to be a lot more tolerant. That because I think there is a sort of acceptance and acknowledgement that the previous generation has left Pakistan in a very bad shape for us.
I mean, in February, we never saw any mass rallies. We never saw Crush India stickers. We never saw anything.
And it is
all we saw was humor.
I agree.
And not just in the young people.
I mean, just look what happened with Abhinandan. Right?
No,
Everybody.
Islami did not take out national.
They didn't even give any statements. No, that's what I'm saying. This entire generation, you people younger than you, even in their teens, what I'm saying is that their reaction, not your generation. You actually, read. You write, you are talking in a different way. I am talking about the social media generation. What they see is statements of a cricketer, of a singer, of an actor, of a model, and they are very upset about. You know how they are hyped in our media.
I still think that the younger generation, it has changed so much that in our time when we were young, for us, Wasim Akram was a hero. Virat Kohli is definitely a hero for the younger generation in Pakistan as well. So that tells you a lot on how much he does.
So
exactly.
We've actually overrun. I think the discussion was so animated that we've overrun our program today. So do let us know what you think. We have different viewpoints, we think, and we look at different things from a different angle, and we agree to disagree. So let's hear you and what you have to say about what you talked about today. Thank you.